watching those barrels get filled up, it's a part of you who's like, you know, kids may not have Christmas this year if I screw this.
I don't want to talk about how much whiskey I just got on my blazer. Hey, and welcome to Weekly Whiskey After Hours, guys. Thanks for joining us here. Got a special episode for you tonight. We're going to do a little live tasting and a little product debut with our buddy Blake from Seelbachs. Blake, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's good to have you.
Jay, what do you think? Are you excited about this? I'm a little bit excited about this.
I mean, you know my stance on breakfast food. I've been raring to go.
We do like breakfast, and we do like bourbon. So these things tie together pretty nicely. What do you say we just go ahead and crack into this a little bit to discuss it? Bust out a bottle, show it to the screen.
Yeah.
Maybe even hear a little bit about the story here. What do you say?
That sounds great to me. We have Seelbachs Private Reserve, and we have the man behind Seelbachs Private Reserve. So why don't you take it away, Blake? What are we talking about? And what are we drinking?
Yeah, so this is for those who don't know, I have a retail site called Seelbachs. If you're watching, this show, I'm sure you're at least somewhat familiar. I've been on the show a couple times. But yeah, so this kind of came as an idea of I was looking into doing some kind of private label, something different, and I came across some bourbon. It came to me blended. It was a blend of 2.5-year-old bourbon and 10-year-old bourbon, which it actually was in essentially a Solera barrel, 4,000 gallon Solera barrel, and probably aged in there for almost another 2 years. So what's in the bottle is a little bit older, but with TTB laws, you got to go with what it went out of its original barrel as the age. So from there, I think it all started as a joke on a bourbon roundtable one time. We were talking about French oak and breakfast bourbon, and I said somebody should do a toasted French oak barrel, and you could call it French toast bourbon. And then I was like, oh, you should put it in maple syrup and call it French toasted maple syrup. And then I'm actually a huge fan of toasted barrels in general. I've loved the Michter stuff. I know it's a little polarizing, but I do love their toasted barrels, especially the rye. I think it does really well in there. And so I was like, well, you know what? It was a little nerve wracking. I'm not going to lie, but I was able to source 3 new toasted French oak barrels and get 3 maple syrup barrels from Bissell Farms. And watching those barrels get filled up, it's a part of you who's like, kids may not have Christmas this year if I screw this. It was definitely the biggest, one of the bigger risks I've taken with Seelbachs is to buy that much bourbon and to put it into untested blends. But no, I was excited about it. So it went into the toasted French oak for about 28 days. That new toast is very pungent and works really fast and can turn really fast. So only about 28 days, and then it was in the maple syrup right at about 2 months. And so then blended both things back together. I kind of went all mad scientist on it of, is it 60% toasted French oak and 30% maple, and then I left some unfinished as well to use as blending. And what ultimately I liked best was just 50-50 toasted French oak to maple syrup. I think that was the one concession I gave to the bottling team who did the bottling for me. Everything else they hate me on because it's like, oh, you've got to hand label, then handwrite the bottle batch and proof, then wax dip it. So at least I gave them a little bit of a break on the blending. And so it ended up being 50-50. And yeah, so called it Seelbachs Private Reserve. And then, there's the still in the background, which has a lot of, I don't know if I've ever talked about the detail on that before. And then the back label, there's like a gold bar across. And if you actually go to the Seelbach Hotel in Kentucky, you'll see that's the decorative thing they have on the awning outside the hotel. So it's a little tie in there. And then like the still, there's a key in the front of the still is like it's the tagline is unlocking craft spirits. And then there's 4, I forget what you call it, but it's basically on the still where you put the plates. But I have 4 kids, so there's 4 plates on the still. And then what else? There's something else in there, but yeah, so that's a pretty big thing. It's kind of a project feel like I've just spent a ton of time on and was incredibly excited to finally release it. Was really happy with how the product turned out, and yeah, excited to have you guys try it.
Man, so you couldn't just go ahead and make a finished bourbon. You had to go ahead and turn all of these things into their own ingredients and then go extremely complicated on the label, even though actually the label looks simple and elegant and great. I really like what you did with the design of the packaging. I think that's good.
Appreciate
But
it.
I wouldn't have realized how much thought had gone into something as simple as the 4 plates on the still. And I don't think I ever noticed the key. Is your standard Seelbachs logo have the key on the
It
still?
does.
I don't think I've ever noticed that. I never looked that closely at the logo itself.
Yeah, and there's some things on like and Alan Bishop gonna kill me for not knowing my still parts, but like where the still comes off, and there's different things. Like if it comes off straight, you're gonna pull more alcohol. It's gonna be a cleaner run, and if it's turned down a little bit, it's gonna be more flavorful. So we aim for the more flavorful. So that's why our logo is kind of bent down like that as well. So yeah, it's a fun thing. I appreciate you saying it comes across clean, because I didn't do myself any favors, especially which I found out recently. I'm good with promotion online. I'm not good with like self promotion with my friends, because I had more people be like, "Hold on, you do bourbon stuff? Like, could I get a bottle of that?"
Yeah.
And then trying to explain to a guy you went to high school with, who's not that really into bourbon, like, well, here's what I did. I took a blend of bourbon, then I put it in French toast, and then I put yeah. So it was a lot of fun, and ended up being really happy with how it turned out.
All right. So I'm curious, how big of a batch did this yield? It sounds like, big voter kind of age things. Those are usually pretty big. Was this a small batch or a fairly large one?
Yeah. So for the first batch, I had 1,000 bottles. So there is a batch 2 that I'm working on, hopefully in November, that will be the same stuff with just a little bit different blend to it. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. I mean, 1,000 bottles, I was sweating a little bit when we released, 690 bottles of Pinhook or something. I was like, oh boy, I hope this goes okay.
I was sweating this one a whole lot.
Oh gosh, I bet. I mean, a lot went into Pinhook, like so much more went into the French toast flavor factory.
It is. It's funny because you think like, bourbon's a fun, exciting hobby. We all love it and do cool things with it. And then I'm starting to do this, and I'm like, what if it doesn't sell? What if nobody wants it? What if I have to give it away? What if everybody tries it? And like all these things start going through your head, and coming to the day of, a guy who works with me was like, you good this morning? Like,
you all right?
I'm like, yeah, I don't know why I set the launch for 3 p.m. That now I just have to go through my day until 3 p.m. And then then there's a bunch of people on the side, and we sold like 500 bottles in the first 30 minutes. And I feel like then I could take a sigh of relief a little bit of like, okay, I'm not, you want things to do well, and I'm always competitive and want to see it sell out. Like, if I'm being honest, and I had my number in my head where if I sold that, I was good. And so good news is we hit that in the first hour or so. And I'm like, okay, I can relax now. I can, maybe actually pour a glass of it.
Yep.
You have a glass of water. Yeah.
Now all you got to do is sweat it out until the reviews start rolling in, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's sold now. I mean, you got a professional style palate, but no, it's cool. I think it's cool. This is kind of unprecedented. We haven't seen a lot. We've seen a lot of blending. Blending is becoming more popular, which is really great, John, and I love to see it. But I would say that this probably goes to 11. Like, I didn't expect the French toasted oak, and then we've got maple syrup, which it's cool. People do one or the other, and it's usually just one age and one mash bill. So you're playing like blending bingo as far as I'm concerned, where you're like, what's run row? We'll just do the whole card all at once. But
just cast a wide net on the first attempt. Why not?
That's right.
But I think we've talked about this before. I think on here as well. Just you know, it's really tough to get all the flavor and you know, kind of profile you want to hit with just one barrel. But when you start to add multiple barrels in, complexity and layers becomes a whole lot easier. And that's what I found even with the different toast and finishes is you start to add in those on top of different ages of barrels and everything. You're really starting to get some nuances and some depth and kind of plays around, and that's where I didn't want it to be overly toasted and didn't want it to be overly maple. So I feel like sometimes I get a heavy maple on the nose, and sometimes I just get like this nice rounded toasted note on the nose. And that's exactly what I was going for. You know, I feel like it is a little bit different as I drink it through the bottle. And so that was the goal, and I feel like got somewhat there. So that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. We can start dissecting this a little bit and talk about it here as we sip through. But my initial thoughts on this were, I was scared of two things. Well, three, if I'm totally honest. But the two big things that scare me with barrel finish and stuff like this is I'm not a huge fan of most toasted finish products. I think they end up going into too much of a hot chocolate or like toasted marshmallow or like an overly sweet profile that I feel like doesn't allow itself to really achieve a good balance. So I was a little bit scared about that. The French oak I tend to like more because it brings usually a nicer background of spice to go with the mocha that it can kind of kick up, and I like that. The Davies County, actually, Jay and I reviewed that. Geez, it would have been well over a year ago. I think of the three products that they sent us, the French oak was among our favorite. We kind of went back and forth, I think, on the Cabernet French. Anyhow, in the toasted world, most of those products have been something that sort of turned me away. And then in the sweeter side of finishing, whether it's a honey cask or maple or something to those effects, those can really kind of drive forward with very one-dimensional flavors. So I was a little bit scared for that. But then when I found out that the blend it actually came out to a 50-50, I was like, okay, well, maybe there's room for some good offset here. The third thing that was a little scary was obviously the wild ass age statement. Like, okay, so this is a combination of 2.5 year and 10-year whiskey. Like, what does that even average out to before it's finished?
Yeah.
So, like in my mind, I'm like, man, there's a lot of moving parts here, and I'm really curious to see where the rubber meets the road and what
Where they
actually
land.
shakes out. Yeah, what is this actually going to do?
Down on the runway or not?
Right. And I mean, we can dig into a little bit of tasting here, but I think you really pulled off something that is really balanced, and I was really impressed with it when Jay and I did our initial tasting. And I don't know if we posted that. Oh, yeah, that was a live review that we did, actually. Sometimes I can't remember if we do these things live or pre-recorded.
It's a good thing you have an admin assistant.
Yeah, seriously. I got a good editor, too. I was pretty impressed with the amount of depth that it had and how, even though the youth is present, it's not wild or super green or like throwing off. I mean, if anything, it's working in harmony with the other components of the blend. So I really dig that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I did think it'd be really funny if y'all just brought me on the show and started telling me how much you hated it and just.
So thanks for coming on.
Smash
That
a bottle.
bourbon you made sucks.
Yeah. I'm glad you like it. Do feel a little relieved, but no, and honestly, like buying the bourbon and the amount that I bought of it was like very very risky because I thought the same thing on the 2.5-year-old. Didn't, you know, like how much youth is going to be on this, and then when I initially got it, I'm like, oh wow, that's not what I was expecting. And maybe it has something to do with the amount of time spent in the Solera barrel and all of that. That definitely helps. But yeah, I mean, I think some of those notes pop out, but overall, I didn't drink it thinking like, wow, this must have some young bourbon in it, and that's what I really liked.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. Maple, like the kind of maple syrup honey barrel. We're even seeing weirder stuff like vanilla bean. Like what? But that's a different topic. I really am intrigued by maple syrup. I love syrup and like pancakes and French toast. Like I'm a big breakfast food guy, which is why I try not to eat it because I could eat French toast like every day. So when I read, like this is, and Blake, I know you have a sweet tooth to begin with. So I was like, all right, if Blake says it's French toast, like I know it's gonna be sweet, like bring it on. Like
I wanted to call it like Mama's French toast breakfast. Shout out to Cracker Barrel, but
and C and a D, yeah, coming on in. But I
Right.
really like it. I think what I really like is that it has clear transitions, which I think is interesting for the blend of ages. Like it's big and sweet up front, especially on the nose, and then that big spice bite comes in, and it has a surprisingly tannic finish, which works so well here. And I'm a big, like I'm kind of tannin averse. Like if it's big and bitter and oaky, I typically don't like it. But the maple just keeps it in the right spot, which I think is fun. And the viscosity is great. I would love to see this just put blind places, just like maybe not like a spirits competition blind, but just like, oh, why don't you try a little bit of this? And I would just love to see what people guess.
yeah.
I would have loved to see what I would have guessed this, to be quite honest.
Totally, yeah.
Because I don't think and I honestly don't think I would pick up immediately. Like some you do, you pick out, oh, that's toasted French oak. Like you can just tell, but I think it would be harder on this one just because it is a very sweet nose, but it's not like one note of sweetness. So I feel like it just throw people off, and I kind of like screwing with people as well. So that makes it even more fun to
Yeah,
have
this all
bourbon
works
that
out
does that.
beautifully.
Yeah.
I am curious. So before we go ahead and wrap for the night, what is the biggest thing you learned from this experiment? I know you kind of teased that maybe there's a second batch coming. We won't make you give away all your cards, but like I have to imagine this was a hugely educational exercise. Like what was the biggest thing you take away from this?
Yeah, it is really crazy. I don't know how distillers and brands do this like nonstop for a living, because I had no idea, one, like every little thing that goes into it. It's like, oh, you want this label? Okay, well, what, how thick is the paper? How does it lay on the bottling machine? How is it used with the ink? You want gold foil on there? Well, you can't use this paper. And then, oh, you want this bottle? Okay, well, you could do this cap, but this cap doesn't fit for this. Like, there are so many things, and every single one of them has an issue and a delay and a slowdown. We were supposed to get glass in like February. I think the glass finally showed up in May, and went round and round with the label printer, and labels show up. They were not printed the correct space apart, so then they had to be hand labeled by the bottler that I used. And just, there is so much that goes into a bottle to sit on a shelf. I don't know how. And I mean, like Wild Turkey and Jim Beam, they figured it out. It's all automated. But like some of these other brands, like how do you get a bottle on the shelf for $40? It just seems insane. I guess economies of scale, but that was the biggest thing, to be honest, just to learn, like, and then to go to the TTB to submit. So this isn't the original design. The original design it was almost like a darker bluish square design thing that went and highlighted the toasted French oak and the maple syrup. And then the TTB was like, no, you can't say that. It says straight bourbon whiskey. And it's not straight bourbon whiskey. We're like, well, yeah, well, we know that. That's why we submitted the cola under whiskey specialty. And just going round and round with them and having to do these minute changes. But then to do a minute change means I have to get it from the distiller, send it to the designer. He sends it back. Then we send it to them, and they just either decline it or go forward with it. So, yeah, I mean, just there is so much work that goes on in the back end that I had no idea about. That really eye-opening.
Okay, really cool. I mean, that's my favorite thing to ask people. Like you always expect you're going to learn something. You never know what bump in the road is going to be.
Yeah.
Like, and some are bigger than others. But cool.
Even wax, I didn't know there's like different viscosities of wax. So shout out to King's Wax in Canada. They make some of the best bottle dipping wax around.
All right,
Outstanding news.
That's pretty cool. Well, thank you again for joining us tonight. It was really cool. We loved watching this. We had hints and we kind of knew that it was coming here and there, but it's fun to sit down and get to talk about all the nuance of it. And we're looking forward to the secret but not so secret batch 2 coming eventually. But if people are looking, I know this is sold out, so it's kind of tough. Like we don't give you your usual plug, but like if people are looking for your next project, if they're looking for other crazy things you do, where can they find your stuff?
Yeah, definitely on Instagram. Post a lot there. Should be some on Facebook. And then if you join the Seelbachs email list, we'll be plugging batch 2. We are shooting for sometime in November. I'm not going to say early or late because bourbon is still working on the blend, or we're still working on the bourbon blend. So I won't jump to any conclusions just there. But yeah, any of those things, seelbachs.com, Seelbachs. On Instagram, it's Drink Seelbachs. And then obviously my personal account is Bourboner, BOURBONR. And yeah, if you're on any of those, you won't be able to miss batch 2. You'll probably be sick of seeing whatever I'm saying about it at that point. So
Well, I love it. Well, cool. Thank you so much again. If you guys are looking for more from us, we are Weekly Whiskey. This is another great after hours. So it's Thursday. Catch us on Tuesday for a live stream. If you're looking for more from John, you can find him over at the Bourbon Finder, Instagram, website, really great resource. If you're looking for more from me, you can find me at whiskeyraiders.com. And together we are Weekly Whiskey. If you like what we do, you can support us at patreon.com/thewhiskeynet. And thanks for joining us, everyone. Cheers.
All right. Cheers, guys.